massacre in Gaza continues, and Israeli spokespeople keep going on television. October 7th, October 7th, October 7th. Also, we are the most moral army in the world. Also, we're definitely not committing war crimes at an unprecedented scale, as every metric indicates. And then when that doesn't necessarily work, they try vaguely threatening people, question mark. This is Channel 4's Krishnan Guru Murthy speaking to Israeli spokesperson Elon Levy, who's been on TV before. And
we should be in prison.
Yeah. They respond. I'm glad all this is on video, honestly.
Evidence.
The Channel 4 anchor here asks Levy or Levi to respond to a video that was played at the ICJ trial, which was a part of the evidence presented by South Africa. We played it on this program, showing that Israeli soldiers took what Netanyahu and other high-level Israeli officials said about Amalek,
right?
The biblical people that are supposed to be wiped out, wipe out their seed, wipe out, I'm paraphrasing, but kill everybody because they are the enemy of your people, and basically called Palestinians Amalek, which the South African case says this shows genocidal intent by the Israeli government, and Israeli soldiers took it as genocidal intent. So there's a video of them. Is this included in the interview, the video? Okay, enough of my... The video is not included, right? Okay, so they describe it, but enough of my prelude. This is how it went down.
Video that was played in court yesterday of Israeli soldiers singing about Amalek and singing about the fact that there were no innocent civilians.
And in every war, soldiers may perform things for social media that have absolutely nothing to do with the declared goals of this war, and everyone at every level understands.
But it revealed their goals.
That this goal, and again, you keep going back to this Amalek reference, refers to the destruction.
Pause it, forget the Amalek thing. They literally said there are no civilians in Gaza, okay? And also, we had actually a huge scandal here with the Abu Ghraib prison photos, and the idea that if there were chanting, I would love to know and publicize it, actually, if American soldiers were doing things specifically like that.
Chelsea Manning did. Chelsea Manning published, I mean, that was a big part of what she went to prison for, was the leaks of the U.S. soldiers on the Apache helicopters basically laughing as they gunned down civilians.
Yeah, exactly. This is a scandal, and it's not something to celebrate, to the extent that it does happen.
Yeah, even if you don't want to say it's genocidal intent, it's clearly wrong for the military to view that as their objective in a war. Again, it's not a war. That would require there to be at least some semblance of even-handed sides, or the ability for the population to fight back. We know what this is. It's definitely not a war.
Yeah, I mean, and Bush and administration should have people going to prison too. But even they went the distance of saying, look, we're not at war with all Muslim people. We're just at war with Al Qaeda or whatever, right? I don't know.
No, meanwhile, yeah.
President Herzog saying that there's no innocent people in that nation.
There's no innocent people in that nation. It's in the DNA of Arabs to hoard their food, so we can't give them food. I mean, we're talking deep, crazy genocidal racism here.
There's just tons of evidence. There's tons of clips, all taken out of context.
Yeah,
apparently.
and not just verbal too. The verbal stuff we get too hang up on. That's why I think the focus on Amalek. They literally just demolished maybe the final standing university in Gaza. They've bombed all the hospitals. This is Baruch Himmerling, who a former Israeli historian, used the term politicide when you wipe out the structures that help people determine themselves politically. This is just obvious, all these different examples are basically just you have a multitude of examples you could be pointing out.
Exactly.
Declared goals of this war, and everyone at every level understands.
But it revealed their goals.
That this goal, and again, you keep going back to this Amalek reference, refers to the destruction of Hamas. It refers to the destruction of the terrorist
in that video?
organization. It refers to the destruction of the terrorist organization.
But in that video, we see them chanting about there are no
Prime
innocents.
Minister has been clear,
No
and
innocent
the Defense
civilians, right.
Minister and the War Cabinet, and all those who make decisions, including the Chief of Staff and all the senior generals, that our war is a war against Hamas and not the Palestinian
So
people.
were those soldiers wrong? Was that chanting wrong? Had a senior officer or a politician come in, would they have said, stop that, that's wrong?
I'm not familiar with the particular video. I didn't.
The video that was played in court yesterday.
I haven't watched that particular video. I was on
It's
a
a
flight from
joke.
Tel Aviv yesterday during the proceedings. But of course, if
It's
soldiers
recorded.
say things that are not in accordance with the military goals of the campaign, that is not acceptable. And the army has already disciplined soldiers on occasions
Can you
when
pause
they have
it?
deviated.
The problem with your statement here is that what the genocide case is showing, and Brandon, you were at The Hague, right? I mean, not to, oh, he's frozen. Dang it. But the problem is that it is the stated goals of the government. That is what is being shown. Netanyahu invoking Amalek, okay? And then the soldiers chanting about it and saying there are no innocent civilians. For people that don't know, this is the Bible verse. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. What that means is Amalek equals Palestinians in Gaza. Go and smite them, destroy all that they have, spare them not, slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. That is the verse that was invoked by Netanyahu. Then you have soldiers chanting about it, saying there are no innocent civilians. That is one of the stronger examples that South Africa was able to present.
And you don't even need to get to the biblical stuff. 1 hour ago, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has told U.S. that he opposes Palestinian state in any post-war scenario. Like, sorry, ending a nation that should be like everyone agrees international law exists to be like has a right to people that have the right to self-determination. That's genocide. With regard, independent of the actual bombing that is just hastening what has been going on in slow motion for a while. Ben Gvir, we're going to occupy Gaza and stay there and develop a plan of encouragement to make Palestinians leave. Like this is, and so like. This guy is on the BBC insulting everyone's intelligence by not even. I mean, well, I guess it's just
Pretending he hasn't seen the video.
Exactly, like that. How like that's like.
But he was at the proceedings, but he didn't see the evidence presented by.
I don't care that you were on a
Africa.
plane. Like every. Like,
That's what he said. He was on a plane.
this is recorded.
Yeah.
Like you familiarize yourself with it. Like
He knows it.
That lack of seriousness is an insult. It is it's a provocation. This guy is being provocative right now.
Well,
I mean, I think he's
about to be. Go ahead, Brandon.
I think he's hoping that everyone else at home is, as stupid as the average pundit, although not this guy who's interviewing him is, which is that they probably didn't watch it themselves. And so we can just pretend like no one knows what's on that clip. Did you see it? I didn't see it. When, I don't know what stated policy goals specifically he's referencing, but as the ICJ testimony by South Africa established, like even their like most, I guess, least murderous goals of like just totally displacing all Palestinians in Gaza still constitutes genocide and ethnic cleansing under the Genocide Convention. So It's not enough to say like, oh, well, yeah, that was just a metaphor. The Amalek thing was just a metaphor. It was, it's just the way we talk about these sorts of things. Because even when they're being explicit, they're still talking about genocide.
Yes, exactly.
The presenter should say, hey, you want to leave my studio and go watch it and come prepared next time? And instead we have to treat these people as if they, as he's about to do, get to dictate us lessons.
Yeah, this is how this guy responds under very mild questioning.
And sorry, this is Channel 4, not the BBC.
Campaign. That is not acceptable, and the army has already disciplined soldiers on occasions when they have deviated from the discipline and the standards that we uphold.
So you accept that there could be soldiers who are deviating from your stated goals and killing civilians. Are there any investigations going on?
Christian, on cases where soldiers are believed to have acted in violation of the very severe standards to which we hold ourselves, that is, of course, investigated. But that is
Are
not
there
what
any
South Africa,
current
Christian,
investigations?
But notice that this is where we're taking the question now. It started with South Africa making a blanket and outrageous statement that cheapens the memory of the Holocaust by accusing Israel of genocide for fighting to bring back the hostages who are trapped in the terror dungeons. And now you're asking about
killing
whether there are
hostages.
occasional misdemeanors by soldiers who produce something not entirely appropriate for TikTok. And this shows just how spurious and specious
I'm not
South
talking
Africa's
about
claim is.
occasional misdemeanors. We're talking about more than 24,000 people killed.
Krishnan, the
That's
civilian
That's an
casualties,
extraordinary number of civilian casualties.
and it's tragic. And it's tragic, Krishnan,
Like an earthquake.
everyone who has been killed since October 7th would still be alive if Hamas had not declared war. If Hamas were not fighting this war from densely populated areas, and no one else would be hurt
but this
if
didn't
Hamas
start on October
surrendered
7th
and laid down
in their
its
terms,
arms.
did it?
You're right.
You know, you can say this would not have happened had October the 7th not happened. They would say October the 7th wouldn't have happened had Israel not occupied Gaza in the first place.
I would be very wary of trying in any way to contextualize the atrocities of October 7th.
I'm
The
explaining
fact
what
that
they would
Hamas-
say. I'm not contextualizing. I'm saying
You should, though.
trying to work out when this began
Yes.
is a very
and
confusing
and I'm not
game.
surprised that the army of terror that practiced acts of pedophilia, necrophilia, and sexual mutilation on October 7th would try to paint a different picture in order to justify its atrocities. There is nothing that can justify or contextualize the barbaric acts of sexual violence that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th that we fear they are perpetrating against the 19 women who are still trapped in its terror dungeons, and which it is telling us that it wants to do again
And
and
do you
again.
think the way people are killed in Gaza is also barbaric when they're blown up?
War is a
When
barbaric
children
business.
get their heads blown off?
Krishnan,
Is that barbaric?
Krishnan, war is a barbaric business, but you seem to have me confused with someone who wants this war. We didn't want this war.
No, you're just
We
someone
didn't
who's
start
defending
this
it.
war. we were invaded on October 7th with the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and we are fighting now so that Hamas can never do that again. Krishnan, I wish I could send Hamas an email or wave a magic wand and make it go away, but that's not going to happen.
All right, pause.
We have no
I can't
good
Enough
listen
of
to
this
this.
tone from this guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to be said there, but Brandon, why don't you go ahead?
He's just so condescending because he's relying on like the ignorance of the audience to just not really be fully familiar with like the history of Israel, the history of genocide by the West outside of the Holocaust, so that this can be framed only in terms of like the Holocaust, which is only framed in terms of the impact it had on the Jewish population and not on the other populations who the Germans executed as part of their brutal campaign. You know, it's just insane to me personally. But yeah, the condescension from somebody like, you know, in that position, even as they're being tried in front of the ICJ, I guess it's their only really defense mechanism at this point, because the evidence that was presented, I found to be pretty compelling. And so, you know, all you can do is like feign self-righteousness as though you have a greater capacity for feeling terror than the Palestinian population that you're currently occupying and bombing, which is again a mitigating factor in this. You can't commit, or rather you can't engage in war on a country that you're occupying, on a territory that you're fully occupying.
Brandon,
Yes.
Brandon, I'd be very wary of trying to contextualize this.
I mean,
What does that mean?
Just,
I mean, do you
right.
think I mean, first of
cause and
all,
effect is against the rules here.
it is, I'm not going to, you know, say 100%, but I feel like the skin tone of the interviewer also influenced like the tone of that response, basically trying to say that he might be aligned with terrorists.
I think that's fair to say.
Well, I just,
Go ahead.
I was gonna
I
say,
mean,
you know,
I read it as, because we've already seen this happen. Be careful with how you say what you're about to say, because otherwise we have many lobbyists who will make sure you get fired from your job.
Exactly. That's
That
what that
too.
was. Yeah.
And I was just going to say, you know, I see what he means by contextualizing, because a lot of times when Western society, you know, tries to contextualize stuff like this, it's them providing a justification for why they are committing a genocide, why they are causing a famine in another country, why they're doing like brutal military campaigns in countries we're not like currently at war with. And so every piece of context is a justification for why it's okay to do sort of thing like that, as opposed to just like an explanation of why something is happening and whether or not, you know, you should support a ceasefire or not. You see the same thing just at a micro level, but you try to contextualize why Kanye West acts the way he acts, and they're like, you shouldn't like excuse him. It's like, no, it's not an excuse. It's just that pointing out that this is what he's doing and here's why he's doing it. But in the context of like a Western society, a lot of context is just like, here's why it's okay for someone to do this, as opposed to like, here's why they're doing it.
Who gets to determine the context? It points to who is powerful. They say, but October 7th, they are contextualizing the slaughter of Gazans that we are seeing. And they're saying, actually, the context of October 7th justifies it.
Also, I just wanted to point out that like what he said about like everyone who's died after October 7th would still be alive if not for Hamas committing an atrocity on October 7th. That's just functionally not true, because we know up until that point, Israel had been still killing people inside Gaza and in the West Bank. And so many of those people would probably still have been, record pace. Many of those people who were killed as part of this bombing campaign likely would have been killed or injured, maybe not at the same amount, but over their lifespan, who knows? Because that's just the kind of occupation that Israel is engaging in, which is why people prior to their genocide was calling it an apartheid state. And even then was it arguing that they were engaging in a slower genocidal campaign.
Yeah, and I just want to, when we use the term genocide, I read this yesterday, and I don't want people to think that we're being spurious, as this genocidal enabler would say. These are this is in Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, and this is how it's determined whether a country is committing a genocide. Genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. Israel is guilty of that, so yes. B, causing serious mental or bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Obviously, 100,000 Palestinians in Gaza either killed, missing, or maimed. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. No clean water, no food, no medicine, no anesthesia, no places to live anymore because all the homes are bombed, specifically in North Gaza. 85% displacement, that makes it clear. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. When I mentioned the hospital is essentially non-functioning, the NICU babies decomposing because they don't have any electricity, and I saw an article in Jezebel saying that miscarriages are up 300%, which clearly meets A, B, D, C, and D of Article 2. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. You could argue that imprisoning Palestinian children without really any charges and any recourse is a part of that, but you can kind of abandon that altogether and still make a very strong case because Israel clearly meets A, B, D, C, and D. And I wrote down some of the things he said here just to point this out. That just calling this a genocide cheapens the memory of the Holocaust. I'm really in awe of the arrogance of Israel to claim that they have some sort of authority over all genocides.
Intellectual property.
Because the Holocaust is one of the greatest crimes in the history of humanity, and a genocide of unprecedented industrial scale enabled by European nations and the West, who then outsourced their guilt onto the Middle East and onto Palestinians. But there have been many genocides that meet certain criteria, genocides that have been determined to be genocides that have lesser death counts, lesser people maimed, that have been determined in the ICJ as genocides to meet this specific criteria. So there have been other genocides. The Israeli government does not have a copyright over genocide. Cambodia, the Armenian genocide, Rwanda, the Native American population, lest I go on and on. Okay.
No, I just want to jump in there because I want to second that. That idea is so ridiculous. Sure, maybe Holocaust. Like I would hesitate to use the word Holocaust like that because of association with what was done to the Jews in World War II. genocide, the idea that genocide, are you like, this is just ignorance, that idea that that has any sort of specific relevance to Jews, specifically, no, like that is
But
denial.
that's what the West thinks. They're relying on
that's
Western
because
ignorance because we don't give a crap about genocides happening to the global South.
It's like we are genocide deniers. Like
Yes.
we don't understand that this is exactly what happened to Native Americans, like on the land that we are on right now. And
we're
Israel
genocide.
does, and sorry, Brandon, just one final point, but Israel notices that when it's willing to say like, oh, you think you're so good? Well, you're on stolen land too. Yeah, I also like support land back and things like that to redress that historical crime. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was gonna say, we're genocide justifiers. I would say that, you learn about genocide in American schools. You learn about the genocide of the Native American peoples. Learn about genocide of certain African populations. Even the concentration camps that European countries had in African colonies during the 20th century. But those genocides are a lot of times framed as necessary components of the construction of the West,
right.
Where the Holocaust in the World War II is, while the Holocaust in World War II is extricated from that framework and understood as just some sort of complete atrocity that was done for no reason other than bigotry, and therefore it is the gold standard, for lack of a better term, for how we should understand genocide, because it wasn't there, at least in the minds of the people who were defending Jewish people and defending, the Allied powers. It wasn't done for a justifiable claim to land that was being held by savages. It was being done to a claim to property that was being held by other Western, in some places, and some other Europeans. And so it's framed differently than a lot of other genocides, both in the global South and in the United States and in Australia, because it wasn't viewed historically as a necessary component of actually constructing these countries, or, securing a level of wealth for your country at home that could be, that could be taken from Africa or South America. And so it does have a special place in the minds of, Americans and Western Europeans, because a lot of times they were complicit in those other genocides, and they were defenders of, the rights of humanity in this one. And so that's the framework that they want to understand genocide in, as opposed to one that, even just looks at although people will deny this, I don't know how, because Hitler and other Nazis themselves said this, that a lot of aspects of the Nazi state were inspired by the colonial regimes in Africa. They were inspired by the eradication of the Native American people by, America. It was inspired by Jim Crow, but that just hits too close to home.
But Netanyahu denies it. I mean, Netanyahu was slammed years ago for spreading the conspiracy theory that the Palestinian Grand Mufti gave Hitler the idea to exterminate the Jews, which is Holocaust revisionism. So when that spokesperson there says it's calling what Israel is doing a genocide when it meets 4 out of 5 of the planks of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, just on its face, that it cheapens the memory of the Holocaust. No, that's what you're doing. You're cheapening the memory of the Holocaust, as is the fascist Israeli government. By the way, continuing to frame it as the largest attack on Jews since the Holocaust also does that.
They've turned it into they've turned that anti-Semitism of the Holocaust into a spear of Western white supremacy. When you see France and Germany now arguing that Israel can't be doing a genocide because that's only something that we did to them. It's horrible.
And to the problem of the Arab savages, by their estimation, in the Middle East, who now bear the brunt of the reparations that Germany and European nations and the United States should bear for, by the way, turning away Jews who were fleeing the Holocaust. That that goes to the populations who can't necessarily fight back resource-wise, and then we'll call them anti-Semites and terrorists. And then here's the other thing. Oh, what do I want to do? Send Hamas an email? No, you smug piece of shit. That's not what anyone is actually saying. People are saying that you should should have gone in. If you, I understand that when October 7th happened, that Israel wasn't going to be like, maybe we should reevaluate the apartheid and ethnic cleansing that we're doing. I understand they're a Western state. They're going to respond with force. They're going to go in and try to kill people. They could have gone in a special operation and gone after Hamas. They know exactly where every, where they can go and try to execute this operation. They knew where certain Hamas leaders are in Qatar right now. If they really want to go after Hamas, they could have freaking struck Qatar. They're not even doing any of that right now. They're going after in Lebanon, Syria, striking everywhere, right? That's not the point of this. It was it was the opportunity for them to do the genocide that they always wanted, okay? So there were other alternatives, not genocide, not carpet bombing, and it's an insult to everybody's intelligence to sit there and say that that's the only way that you could have responded.
Those hostages, the hostages have only been released during the ceasefire period. There was plenty of Palestinians locked up in Israeli prisons prior to October 7th that could have been used for trades, but they don't want to do that because they have been in trouble for the Hannibal doctrine of we don't actually want even soldiers taking hostages because that's a problem for us, so let them die.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
It's also just like wild to your point that like how often they will repeat this line that the only way they get hostages back is to bomb indiscriminately.
They've killed more hostages than they've saved.
Yep.
Undoubtedly, but like that's just such a twist of logic that you now see people repeating like it makes any kind of sense. And, it's just not how anyone has taught to negotiate with like hostage takers. But, now it's just become a show of force that is supposed to be, make the situation magically better.
Yeah, and I just can't, the way Zionists have used, anti-Semitism. You had the former, I think it was ambassador to Israel on Dave Rubin's program a few months ago saying, oh, yeah, what you guys need to do is close your border. Exactly why Israel was created in the first place is because Western countries didn't want to take Jewish refugees during the Holocaust. Rather, actually, we have a better idea for you. We've always wanted to have an outpost in the Middle East. How about you go do that for us? I think that stuff is pretty relevant.
Well, no, I think failing to engage with the actual ideological underpinnings of the Holocaust that were widespread in Europe and also the United States at the time that it happened, it just never got any better because it was all sort of concentrated into people's minds as a unique sin of the German state in the 1940s and 30s and I guess 20s, whatever. There was a failure to reckon with just how much of that, ideological underpinning not just came from the United States, but is still there and still present in the way we do things.
Yeah. All right, folks. Should we take a call?
Do we do 45 minutes on that Israeli spokesperson?
I think it was closer to 30, and I feel badly. But man, I don't know. I don't know when we're gonna reach some sort of. I think the people are wondering that there's so many other atrocities happening in the world. What's happening in the Congo? I'm seeing, why not talk about that? And that's fair. But I think for one, it's the genocide that we're funding. Israel's the top recipient of our foreign aid and military aid. And frankly, it's an outpost for our interests, as Matt just said. So it should be viewed in that way. Two, it's the constant gaslighting. It is the constant gaslighting that seemingly is unyielding. And that, I think, is just what is so infuriating about the whole thing. Although, to borrow from Norm Macdonald about Bill Cosby, when someone said the hypocrisy was the worst thing about him, that's not the worst thing. It'd be down the list. The gaslighting's definitely down the list after the genocide.
I do think the relevance is even broader than Palestinians, though. This is a test for a world law and institutions. Can they call a genocide, or is genocide just something that Western powers will deploy if they want to, say, agitate against China, or intervene in Kosovo or Ukraine? It's just when we actually want to do something, that's when we'll call it a genocide. When we don't want to, it's ooh, who knows, man? These definitions.
Yes, Sam from Ottawa says, if it's not a genocide in Palestine, what is it? The rung below? Is that better? Does it not inevitably lead to the next rung?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an ethnic cleansing. The genocide. I mean, this is the thing is like, I am someone who supports a more expansive version of genocide that would encompass splitting up Palestinians between different populations in Gaza, the West Bank, and exiles even beyond that and stuff like that, and inability to let people reproduce themselves, because I think that's. In addition to germ warfare and other sort of massacres, that's how the genocide of Native Americans was conducted on this continent. And so, like, I don't just think you need to be killing 20,000 civilians in a few months to call it a genocide, but I do think, like, if the world can't see like a what's basically a slow motion genocide turn into a more acute, extermination opportunity and opportunity for ethnic cleansing, like all these books that have the pictures of the Nakba in 1948, and you see people on long lines of people being moved, we've dwarfed those images.
Yeah.
In the last few months.
Yep.
Also, surely the Genocide Convention is also intended to try to prevent ongoing genocide from getting to the point in which they're like 98% of a population in a location are just displaced or killed. It seems like, a lot of what Israel is relying on in this situation is people using like a colloquial understanding of what the word means to like supplant like common sense, which is that like, oh, you can only call something a genocide once every single person who fits into this category has been killed. But we've never defined genocide that way. Like it doesn't make any sense to define.
There's
genocide
a legal definition of genocide, and it just anyway.